Hello, this is Gary Boomer, founder of Boomer Consulting, and today I have with me Marc Staut. One of the things that we've done new this year is that we've brought on a couple of new shareholders. Marc's been a shareholder for several years, but when we brought the new shareholders on, I had the opportunity to do a short interview with them, and we found it so productive, and the clients were so interested. I said, we need to do this with Marc. So our audience really gets to know a little bit more about the background, how he's grown at Boomer Consulting, and really how he got here and what he sees in the future. So it's pretty broad based today. We're going to try to do this in about 20 minutes. But Marc, you might tell a little bit about your background and how you started at Boomer Consulting.
Yeah, absolutely. So before coming over to Boomer Consulting, I was with a firm for more than 17 years, and I kind of grew up with that firm. I started when I was the 248th employee, and by the time that I left, we had over 3,000 people. I was one of 300 partners, and I was running their entire technology department as the CIO.
Well, that's a great background for the clients that we work with, because while many of them aren't that large, many of them have the same issues, and there continue to be those issues today. And technology is certainly a big part of it. Tell us a little bit about the first 3 years at Boomer Consulting and what you learned about us and what you learned about the market from being out in the market from our
Yep.
perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because when I first decided I was going to leave the firm, I knew I had a passion for continuing to work in the profession. This profession had been so good to me, and I was so excited by the opportunities that firms had. There were so many things still to do, and I really wanted to stop focusing on just one client, the firm that I was a part of, and say, hey, how can I really have a bigger impact, and how can I share some of these things, and how am I going to do that? And that ended up leading me down the path of being a consultant. And as you know, I kind of set up my own shingle for a little while there, and said, yeah, I'm just gonna do this on my own for a little while. And you were one of the people who picked up the phone, and you're like, why are you doing it that way, Marc? That's doing it the hard way. Why don't you come over and do it here, where we've got the support and the background, and then you can focus on the things that are really important to you. And I thought about that, and my first thought was, yeah, no, maybe eventually. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that my unique ability is really in working with the firms. It's not in doing the billing. It's not in doing all the back end stuff. And that coming and joining Boomer Consulting, who I had known and had a relationship and worked with as a client for more than 10 years, just made so much sense to me, because I could stay plugged in with that community that I had gotten so much value from over the years, that had truly contributed to my growth and my maturity in my role. And then I could turn around and give back. What more perfect way to do that? So that was kind of the path that led me to joining Boomer Consulting. And then, of course, once I got here, it was another story entirely. Going and starting a technology practice, something that Boomer had done, and still did some of the consulting from a technology perspective for several years, but it wasn't a focal point anymore. Really the communities were, and there were other consulting areas. So I came in and said, I really want to build this back up and say, how are we going to do this? And how are we going to take it to another level? How are we at Boomer Consulting, going to be the type of consultant that when I was a CIO, I wanted to bring in, I wanted help from? And you had done that for me years before, Gary, where you were brought into the firm and gave that perspective, and you served as a bridge to the business and the technology side. And you helped us make that connection and that relationship so much stronger. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. But it takes a little bit of time. It's not an overnight kind of thing. So I spent my first year at Boomer Consulting really telling people that story right there, what it was I was doing and why I was trying to do it, and letting them know that we were available to help them. And that was kind of a slow year. So I was really glad that I didn't come in as a shareholder on day one. We had decided that, hey, I was on that track. That was something that would happen. But if I had had that pressure to build a brand new pipeline in my first year, I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have cracked, because it is a whole lot of pressure. And I needed to just focus on being a consultant and an excellent consultant to the profession. And then in year two, I was able to be a shareholder with Boomer Consulting. And then I was able to kind of see how my role could be in both, and how I could contribute to the growth of the company as well as to the growth of our clients.
Well, I can certainly relate to that. And unless you're an entrepreneur and have started a firm, it's a little bit difficult to understand how many moving parts. But I saw early on that the clients needed a broader range of consulting than any one individual. So it was going to take a team. In order for that team to function properly, it took a back office. Now, one of the things that has always impressed me about you, Mark, is your willingness to develop people and the fact that you're a lifelong learner. So you might talk a little bit about that and what you found in our culture.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that's amazing is that we do have a culture, and we all believe it. I've never been around so many people who read so much, who ingest so much information. And that's wonderful. We even have time that we carve out of every day to give ourselves space to learn new things, whether it's, research a new technology, or look into an article, or read a new book. Whatever that is, we really, really double down on that. And what that does is that actually lets us be a bridge for our clients. So we're out there looking for those new ideas. We're out there looking for things that are going to challenge the way that people think. And that's one of my absolute favorite parts of being at Boomer, is I get an opportunity to do that. I get an opportunity to say, hey, I've learned something really cool. Now, what can I create around that that is going to provide value for our clients? It might be a presentation, it might be a new tool, it might be a way of challenging them in a workshop. But all of those things, that's what I love doing. That's one of my unique abilities, Gary, is processing a ton of information and then saying, wow, this is some really cool stuff. How do I teach other people about that? I actually look at my role almost, yes, I'm a consultant for sure by definition, but I think of myself as an educator. I think of myself as somebody who loves to teach people the things that I've learned, so that we can have those conversations, because that's where it really starts to accelerate, is when everybody gets these new ideas. The things that come out of that, the innovations and the creativity, is just absolutely magical.
Well, I've always believed that you had to look outside your profession in order to change. And it's very difficult to change if you're just looking on the inside. Dan Sullivan, one of our coaches, has always said it's easy to get high on your own supply. And Kurt Gödel, an Austrian economist, always said it's difficult to change the process when you're part of the process.
Yep.
And one thing you mentioned that I'd like to have you expand on is this reading, the first 15. You might tell our audience about that. We got that idea from a client, Chuck Buckman, and it's been a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So we give every person in the firm, in Boomer Consulting, 15 minutes out of their day where they are on the clock. It is considered part of their day, and they are able to look into and learn new things. Some people like to listen to podcasts. Other people like to read. Other people like to go through news articles. All sorts of different opportunities for how that learning happens, but it's become part of our culture. And it doesn't have to be the first 15 says, hey, you start off your day that way. And that's actually where I like to take mine. I like to go through all the tech blogs, go through all my news sources, go through and look at all of the things that are happening, and that I'm tracking all these different ideas and technologies and strategies. And it's easier for me to do that kind of before my day really gets off and running. But some people like to do it at the end of the day too. So it's really a matter of whatever works for them, but it is dedicated time for people to learn and improve themselves. And then how do they take that and apply it back to Boomer Consulting and to our clients?
Also, tell us a little bit about how your role has changed over the last 3 years and how I think this is true in most firms, or a lot of firms anyway, and it certainly is at Boomer Consulting. If we can hire great people, it takes us a while to figure out their role and their unique abilities, but they're happier and their production is much greater and they don't burn out if we can get you into your unique abilities. And you've touched on your unique abilities. Now, how has that really changed your role?
For me, it's really innovation. A lot of, I think I ended up in technology because I was good at technology, but it's really because technology was where most of the innovation was happening. And so as I look at, the things that are important to me are being strategic and creation of ideas and ideation. All of those things are fundamental things that I appreciate as and think of as part of my own character. Well, I have had the opportunity to step into the role of the innovation leader at Boomer Consulting. And what an honor that is, because Boomer's always been an innovator. It's always been out front. It's always been saying, hey, there's new ideas here. Let's put this in place and let's try it. So for me to be able to step in and really start to lead a lot of those efforts has been a great honor, but it's also been a lot of eye-opening experience as we work on the business itself and say, hey, how are we going to make sure that we're putting in place a process? Gary, you know this as well as I do, but innovation in most firms and in most companies is actually a process. It's not somebody sitting around just going, ooh, I've got a big idea. Let me write it down. It's here, it's fully baked, right? How do you take those ideas and start to add the structure to them, start to add the support to them, flesh them out, go from creating an idea to making it up, as we like to say, to making it real, to making it happen, right? That making it real part is where I really thrive, where we can take some of those ideas and say, okay, here's how this could work. And then we let people do what they love to do. So it's been a real fun opportunity to try to up the innovation game at such an innovative company. But that's been something that I've spent a lot of time on, especially over the last year.
Well, I always thought you would be good at this, and you've certainly proven that. And let me share with our audience, I have an education in accounting and economics, and I think the economics was more important to learn the accounting than the accounting, the economics. But one of the biggest challenges of all of our firms out there today is mindset. The skill sets are there, or they either have them or they can go hire them. The tool sets and the technology is there, but speak about your educational background and mindset.
Yeah, so I kind of I mentioned that, I think I got into technology because of the innovation aspect. But it turns out that having an undergrad degree in psychology isn't really going to be much of a career. So I ended up taking kind of the long way up the mountain as far as getting my technology experience. But my background is in psychology. And it's still something I am super, super passionate about, understanding why people do things and how things work. I think when I was in college, if they had had a behavioral psychology, which is the combination of essentially economic theory and psychology theory, much like Thaler has done, or Tversky and Kahneman, if they had been more prominent in the school systems, I think I would have stayed there, because that's where my passion really is why do people do things? But I've actually been able to put that into play in my career here too. And, whether it's big firm politics and handling that, or how do we approach different things? How do we generate buy-in for people? How do we manage large teams? I was managing over 100 people when I left. It has actually been one of the greatest foundations for me. And Gary, I think I know where you're going with this. I tend to build a lot of it into a lot of the trainings that I do, or the presentations that I do. So we oftentimes are talking about mindset and the importance of a growth-based mindset, and stretching your thinking and not limiting the way that you're approaching things, but really saying, hey, it's okay to get out of our comfort zone so that we can grow. And again, that ties right back into innovation.
Well, Mark, you remind me a lot of one of the first people that I met that had a psychology background, and he was at Crow. His name was Bruce Gobdell. He was part of their management group, but Crow has always been an innovator and leader in my mind. And they felt that the talent management was critical to their success. And they didn't put an accountant into that role. They put a person that had experience and was educated and a true professional. And we're starting to see more of that today, of how firms are going beyond the accountant's role and hiring professionals in other roles. And I know you agree with that strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. There's all sorts of backgrounds, there's all sorts of experiences, and there's all sorts of talent that can really contribute to the success of a CPA firm. We're starting to see the big four. You're starting to see this in their recruiting, where they're looking really at some of those science, those technology, engineering, mathematics, statistics, and big data, and all of those types of things are taking on a bit of a life of their own inside of the firms, big and small. So we're starting to see a shift where firms are saying, hey, we want talent. We want somebody who gets it, somebody who has a vision for how we can move forward, how we can be better. And when they're open-minded like that and in that growth mindset, there are so many opportunities for firms to really differentiate themselves from the crowd and start to have a competitive advantage with their people, with their technology, with their services, because they're really looking at things a little bit differently than everybody else does. And they can anticipate the market so much better that way.
Well, as we are running out of time here, I'm going to try to tie this all together and tee it up for you, because as Steve Jobs always said, innovation is about hindsight, insight, and foresight. And I think we touched a little bit on your background, the hindsight, the insight today of what's going on. Now tell us about the foresight part of
Yeah.
this and what's coming and what firms should be doing to position themselves.
It's funny. This answer would have been totally different a year ago, right? Because a year ago, we were talking about some of these emerging technologies as still being nascent, right? Still being stuff that we saw coming down the pipe. But I really think of 2020 as a great leap forward, right? We took 5 years forward with our technology. So now we're starting to see these individual technologies converge, where they're starting to accelerate because they're starting to play off of each other. So whether it's 5G being added into the way that we're collecting data and the way that we're able to access data and information, or whether it's blockchain, which don't go to sleep on blockchain, Gary. I'm telling you, a lot of people have kind of said, it's not really there. It is still happening. It's just moving at a smaller pace than people thought. And that reminds me of a Bill Gates quote, which is, we oftentimes tend to overestimate the technology that we're going to see in the next couple of years, but we underestimate the impact of technology over the next 10 years. And that's one of those ones that we have to keep an eye on. Other things that are out there are artificial intelligence and machine learning that is creeping into all of the different firms. And another one that I want you to keep an eye on, Gary, you heard it here first. Quantum computing is a real thing. It is not science fiction. It's really happening out there. And much like machine learning kind of came into being because of IBM's Watson and people being able to leverage that as a service, eventually we're going to be able to crunch through huge data sets and do massive calculations by leveraging quantum computers as a service as well. And that's also going to affect, finally, the security that we have in firms also. So one of those great nightmares for technology and firm leaders combined is the security of our data and how we're protecting client data. There is hope coming very quickly on that one as well. But it really takes sitting down and doing some vision casting to see how these things are going to play out over the next 3, 5, and 10 years.
Well, thanks, Mark. This has been great. I think we need to do this more often. I would just kind of close by saying, I think you've summed up very well where the profession is headed. And I think the big mindset change of many in the profession is that technology is not a disruptor, it's an enabler. And
Yes.
once you flip that mindset, all new opportunities come forward and people are attracted to your firm, clients are attracted to your firm. So mindset and the psychology is very important. But thank you, and it was great to share some of your thoughts today with our listeners.
Absolutely. It's been fun, Gary. Thanks.
You bet.